Hello and welcome. Nexus, by Mike Baron and Steve Rude, is a rare comic where both the writing and art complement one another almost perfectly. It's lean storytelling with expressive but not overly rendered artwork and some unique character designs. Even now, some 40 years later, the title stands as a timeless piece of work. Under simple tales of morality, there's a meaningful theme about humanity and responsibility. It explores the shades of gray inherent when exacting an appropriate level of justice without delivering a specific message or drawing any necessary conclusions. Let's get into it. In 1981, the direct market distributor, Capitol-Comics, decided to add publisher to their business model. The first title they launched was a black and white magazine-sized series called Nexus. It was written by Mike Baron and illustrated by Steve Rude, two newcomers to the industry. Originally, Baron and Rude proposed a series about an encyclopedia salesman set in the distant future. Unsurprisingly, Capitol passed on that idea, but they liked the pages Baron and Rude produced, so they asked them to create a superhero title, which was the market they wanted to invest in. The idea that sparked Nexus was Baron wondering, what if every time a superhero showed up, someone died? In the realm of fiction, it might not have been an entirely original idea. After all, that's essentially the foundation for every police procedural TV show. But it was not something that was explored in superhero comics. Furthermore, superheroes were icons of hope. They helped out and tried to keep people safe. However, with Nexus, when he showed up, it meant only one thing: someone was about to die. So there was a great contrast between what a superhero represented, usually hope and salvation, and how they achieved that goal with violence. Mainstream superheroes stop at the point of terminating a dangerous threat and take a thin moral stand. Nexus did not. The next element was Nexus being haunted by dreams that compelled him to seek justice for the innocent. After that, it was decided that Nexus would exclusively focus on those who committed acts of mass murder. Typically, this would involve the ruling class, but not always. That idea and Rude's character design were approved. To give the series a more professional appearance, the artist, Paul Gulacy, who was currently working on Master of Kung Fu for Marvel, was hired to produce the first two covers. As a package, Nexus looked good and it read well, but it was black and white and oversized, which made it less appealing to comic book collectors. After 3 issues, this format was abandoned for a traditional, regular-sized color comic. As a side note, the third and final issue of the black and white series contained a flexi-disc. This was a piece of plastic, playable on a turntable. It had a theme song and a dramatic reading of that issue. The full version is easy to find on YouTube. End of side note. Nexus was relaunched in 1983. Capitol added Badger and Whisper to its ongoing publishing schedule. With that, Capitol was officially a new publisher ready to challenge Marvel and DC. However, by early 1984, Capitol suddenly decided to suspend their publishing venture. There were a few good reasons for why they did this. The first reason is Capitol didn't print enough comics to get a substantial discount from the printer, so their printing costs were much higher than Marvel or DC. Their comics sold well, but profit was not amazing. Finally, there was industry chatter about an obvious conflict of interest. With Capitol being both a distributor and a publisher, they could, for example, favor shipping their titles before sending out comics from the competition. It's a bad look, and a lawsuit waiting to happen. Overall, they shut down the publishing wing because the comics didn't make as much as they expected. In comparison, the distribution portion of the business was rather successful. Capitol was, at that time, serious competition for Diamond Comics, and they would be for many years. So Capitol could have invested in publishing and tried to turn things around, or they could shut it down and just focus on the most profitable part of the business. Obviously, that's the option they chose. The publishing rights to all 3 titles, Nexus, Badger, and Whisper, were bought by First Comics, where they would continue on for many years. Although it was reported that Marvel was keen to acquire Nexus. But Capitol was only willing to sell the rights as a package deal, and First was willing to take all 3. While there are some deep moralistic parts of Nexus, those are background elements. The majority of the series is a space opera, with an extensive supporting cast and a number of space adventures. Unlike, for example, The Punisher, it doesn't exclusively focus on Nexus going out on missions. There's a lot of discovery and world building. There aren't depressing long episodes of Nexus searching his soul and having an existential crisis every 3 issues. Primarily, there's a story and a plot that needs a resolution. The character beats happen along the way, as opposed to the story pausing to highlight a moment of doubt or justifying certain actions or deeds. It gets to the point while adding necessary complications, without reading like it's skipping scenes to get to the good stuff. Nexus is Horatio Hellpop. He's an educated, moral executioner who is haunted by visions of mass murderers that deserve to die. Nexus is compelled to find these killers and end their lives. It's not a choice on his part. If he delays seeking justice, the visions he's having will eventually kill him. In fact, Mike Baron once stated Nexus was reacting in defense. These terrible people, through these visions, have attacked him. His response is self-preservation. Which is, of course, a justification that most would say is quite reasonable, given the context. So, Nexus does what many would consider the right thing, with extreme, life-threatening coercion. The alternative is to die due to inaction over an ethical or moral objection. The underlying question being, why lose your life over principles in favor of someone who lacks those same principles? Of course, no one wants to die tortured and in agony. That's enough incentive. But there's even more motivation when you exchange your life to protect someone who has taken numerous innocent lives. There is no doubt about Nexus. He is an executioner. When he shows up, someone in power, or who formerly had a position of power, is going to expire. There's no trial. There's no weighing of evidence or valid arguments of mercy. If you catch Nexus's attention, your life expectancy can be measured in minutes. At first, the character of Nexus feels impenetrable. He is distant and removed, even to those around him. He's not cold and calculating, like an objective killer robot. He's simply protective. He carries a burden and responsibility that very few people can relate to. He has found an understanding of who and what he is, and he mostly accepts the necessity of his duty. But like any human being, sometimes he questions that role, and he attempts to find freedom from that responsibility. So his level of comfort is always a sliding scale. There's a complexity to the character. It allows the reader to ask a lot of difficult questions. There are contradictions and subtleties, the answers to which aren't forced into your head, which is the strength of the writing. Overall, to put a bow on this, no one would argue there shouldn't be extreme consequences for extreme actions. At the same time, one must ask, is redemption possible for the guilty? Or are there some crimes that exempt you from any type of redemption? This leads to numerous other ethical and moral questions. Horatio's father was the ruler of an agricultural planet. Due to an uprising, he was forced to destroy that world and escape. With his pregnant wife, they find themselves on the moon, Ilum. There they take up residence within the moon's core and raise their son. Horatio's mother mysteriously disappears and dies, leaving him to be raised by 2 aliens, Alpha and Beta. When Horatio reaches maturity, he begins to have terrible visions. The only thing that helps him during those painful times is the liquid apparatus he lived in following his premature birth. Eventually, Horatio is driven to take action against the person he sees in those visions, his own father. When the deed is done, Horatio returns to normal, and he can live his life as well as he can, until more visions appear. The source of Horatio's power and his visions are not revealed for quite some time, and for those that may be interested in reading the series, I won't spoil that revelation. I will only say it adds even more complexity to Nexus. The moon, Ilum, is the base of operations for Nexus. For the record, Ilum is short for asylum, or political asylum, since the moon is a sanctuary for victims and survivors of intergalactic dictators. These people are under Nexus's protection, somewhat. They are safe because it would be ridiculous to attack Nexus at his home. In other words, the protection is implied rather than being explicit. Ilum itself is an ancient, abandoned city created by an extinct race of aliens. There's a lot of room within it and a fair amount to discover. Again, this ties into the source of Nexus's powers and visions, so I'll skip being detailed. Ilum becomes a melting pot of people from all over the galaxy. The huddled masses form their own loose society and social structure. That said, they were only allowed there by the grace of Nexus, who is a permissive figurehead that could withdraw his support at any time. He doesn't rule Ilum and takes no part of any political process. Even though he's generally kind and rarely objects to anything, well, the people have no choice but to follow his demands, if he makes any. Over time, a large supporting cast develops. This becomes the backdrop of the space opera that emerges. There are those that worship Nexus, others that question him, and some that literally support him during the times he needs help. His trust is limited to a few people, and there's always someone looking to exploit his power. It's fair to say that about half the series is about Horatio Hellpop, and the other half is about the citizens of Ilum. There are numerous agendas that develop organically over time. It never delves too far into melodrama or deep existential themes. There's a pretty even balance between the philosophical issues and the dramatic beats it hits. An important distinction is the comic doesn't demand your sympathy, because like any good subtle writing, the citizens of Ilum are a spectrum of motivations. Most are average people, just looking for a place to call home. Some are spies. Some seek revenge and demand justice. Others have delusions of power. So it is a safe place, open to all. But that also includes individuals who may not have the best intentions. Now, I've only touched upon the major parts of Nexus, mostly because I don't want to spoil it too much for anyone new to the series. However, I'm going to highlight a few other bits that stand out. Sundra Peel, the love interest of Nexus, somewhat begins as a classic, typical girlfriend. She meets Nexus as a reporter trying to get his life story, and they fall in love. Over time, it's revealed she's actually a spy, trying to learn the source of his power. However, she drank the Nexus Kool-Aid and found him to be an admirable person. Her backstory is filled out, and we discover she's far more than a girlfriend type. The alien, Judah Maccabee, is exactly the type of person you'd expect to be a younger acolyte of Nexus. He's inspired to follow his cause and provide justice for the innocent. At the same time, he's fun-loving and approachable, which complements Nexus's straightforward, to-the-point demeanor. Judah isn't a sidekick, but he epitomizes a lot of sidekick elements. Then there's the heads. Yes, like Futurama would do 20 years later, there are thousands of people who are heads in a jar. Eventually, they form their own distinct society. Most have ESP, or telekinetic abilities, and like in The Matrix, they were once used to provide power to enhance starships or specific individuals. Clone Zone is a lounge lizard comedian who isn't especially funny. He seems like a throwback to the lesser-known Rat Pack member, Joey Bishop. Or generally, someone who has no talent, but becomes famous for being famous, like a Kardashian. At one point, Nexus goes through his Elvis phase. Over a number of months, after being able to suppress his visions, he gains weight, surrounds himself with sycophants, takes drugs, and develops a tendency to shoot his TV when he gets bored. This is not the only time the series stops to engage in some light satire. For example, much later in the series, the Nexus power leaves Horatio and enters someone who can only be called the extreme 90s version of the superhero. It's Baron playing with the concept and, probably, making fun of the emerging grim and gritty trend. Again, I'm just touching the highlights. There's numerous characters and elements that fill out the series. Nexus clearly shows its influences. Aesthetically, it looks like a cross between an episode of Space Ghost and the classic comic Magnus the Robot Fighter. Russ Manning's seminal work, with an individual doling out justice to robot baddies, bears a similar thematic weight to Nexus. Of course, the work of Jack Kirby and Alex Toth, who designed Space Ghost, have a noticeable presence. there's a good mix of style and substance. Rude's artwork and designs are smooth and clean. Some alien characters, Tyrone for example, are very cartoony but have a realistic feel. Rude stays within a window of unique appearance and relatability to the human eye. The inker, Eric Shanower, does a very good job of staying out of the way of what Rude puts on the page. The pencils are already strong. It doesn't need further enhancement with extra detail or cross-hatching to distract the eye. The coloring is very muted, which seems to be replicated in the omnibuses put out by Dark Horse. This evokes the time period, and quite honestly, suits the material better than a vibrant palette with degrees of shading. The artwork doesn't require a slick coating of paint on top of it. It works far better with flatter tones to accentuate Rude's artwork. Coloring purists will appreciate the care in preserving the original, natural color scheme. From what I can tell, it's the original work by the original colorist, possibly from the original color separations. It hasn't been digitally painted to have a more modern look. Speaking of Dark Horse, in an act of generosity, which has to be acknowledged, the publisher of Dark Horse, Mike Richardson, bought the rights to Nexus when First Comics went out of business and was being liquidated. Then Richardson gave those rights back to Baron and Rude. That's a gesture so uncommon, it's admirable and notable. Sure, from that point forward, Dark Horse exclusively published Nexus material, so they benefited. But Baron and Rude were free to take the property anywhere they wanted, which is something they've done in recent years. In fact, the creators have split and pursue their own separate versions of Nexus. In a perfect world of creators' rights, that's the best possible result. It has to be acknowledged that the split was due to Baron's controversial recent work and his subsequent alignment with a vocal subsection of fandom. During the original run, Rude didn't pencil the entire series. After the 50th issue, Rude departs to pursue other projects. Before that, there were some fill-in artists, but Rude was pretty consistent until the anniversary mark. After Rude, Paul Smith and Steve Epting would have notable runs on the title, so the artistic quality remained for the majority of the series, which again makes Nexus stand out as a quality comic from that era. For a number of years, Rude attempted to get Nexus an animated series. He even created a trailer, which is available on YouTube. It's quaint, with a distinct 70s Hanna-Barbera feel, which seems suitable considering the influences on the original comic. That said, that may not be the best style for the material, unless the original tone and subtext was greatly toned down for a younger audience, which kind of bleeds the best elements out of the concept. So it's cute, but maybe not a suitable direction for the character. Canonically, there are 105 issues in Nexus continuity. This includes the 3-issue Black and White series, the 80-issue run at First Comics, and the various miniseries done for Dark Horse. From what I can tell, the only canonical story that hasn't been collected is the characters' brief episodes in Dark Horse Presents. Otherwise, everything is collected and available to the best of my knowledge. It's a series worth checking out, or rereading and rediscovering everything you forgot. Despite its weighty undertones, there's some good escapism, and of course, some wonderful art. Thank you for watching. This is one of those videos that slowly gestated over a number of years. I fully expect, because of the subject matter and the fact that I use no coded language, the censorship bots will probably ensure it gets minimal attention. I mean, in addition to the fact that it highlights a comic from the Bronze Age. Yeah, I know, it's like I go out of my way to remain obscure. I swear I don't. Anyway, like, comment, and subscribe, and join Patreon, like the fine people you see listed on screen, all of whom I humbly thank for their ongoing support. Extra special thanks to Chapel Pluto, John Woolham, Plutocracy, Spencer Estes, Green Man, Constant Disappointment Records, Jeff Nicholson, Sickin, Francis De La Cruz, Russell Bull, John Nyukes, Andrew Barton, Odin Ashcroft, Ruby St. Dennis, Phil Sagan, Edward Clayton Andrew, Corey Drew, Brian Deaton, Tom Granis, John Gaunt, James Graham, and Matt Marino. You were all justified and ancient. Anyway, like, comment, and subscribe. Oh, I don't know why my throat's so raspy there.